welcome back. So I'm really excited today to have Steve Schwartz from LSAT Unplugged to answer all your questions about the LSAT, the new LSAT Flex, and starting law school online in general. I'm hoping you could provide sort of a framework about how to get started and some tips that you might have for students just starting out.
Yeah, I definitely can. This is something I've thought a lot about. And so the reason I have is that back when I was studying for the LSAT myself, I made a lot of mistakes. I started taking exam after exam. My scores were stuck in the low 150s and they just would not go up. And so over the course of several years, I've put together a different framework, which is the one I wish I would have done, that I call the LASER approach to LSAT studying. And LASER is an acronym standing for Learning, Accuracy, Sections, Exams, and Review. So learning is learning the theory, reading textbook chapters, watching videos, learning the basics of what the LSAT's asking you for with each section and with each question type. A is for accuracy, doing individual questions by type to better understand the proper perspective from which to view each. S is for sections, doing timed 35-minute sections. E is for exams and endurance, and R is for review. So that's the framework. I call it the LASER approach.
I think one of the things that is on students' minds is with so many resources out there, how do you know which resources to get started with? With so many videos, so many different companies offering different prep resources, how do you know what the best way to start is?
Well, I actually put together study schedules using this framework to remove all the guesswork about what to do so you don't waste any time. You can jump right into it. They're super specific, laying out what to do every single day over the course of your prep, which resources to use for free, like articles on my site or videos on my YouTube channel, and then specifically which LSAT problems to complete afterwards. So you know exactly what to do every single day, whether you're taking the LSAT in 1 month or 6 months.
One of my biggest struggles was definitely learning how to get organized and knowing sort of what to do each day, because I think the strategy that I took that I wish I could go back and change is sort of learning each section for weeks on a time and just focusing on that section. And I wish I had sort of incorporated all the sections into my study plan all at once. I think that could have been a bit more effective. So what are your thoughts on that?
It's a good question. I mean, there's definitely debate as to whether it's better to focus on one section exclusively or do a mix. I definitely agree with you that a mix is better because you can get bored and stale doing the same thing over and over without mixing in the other ones, and you don't want to get rusty as well. So I'd say with my plans, for example, I'll have you start with games, but then add in logical reasoning while still mixing in games that you've done before so that you're not getting rusty on the games, but you're also adding in something new. So I like the idea of mixing it up.
So I feel like everybody have hit sort of a plateau at some point throughout their studying. They see lots of improvement for several weeks at a time, and then you just can't get out of that plateau that you're hitting. So what do you suggest for students that really want to see their score increasing and they can't really figure out what they're doing wrong or how to change their approach?
It's a good question. My first thing would be somewhat counterintuitive, which is take a break. If what you're doing isn't working, it might just be that you're burning out and you need some downtime away from this. You come back and you'll look at it naturally with a more fresh perspective. The other thing I'll say is you might have to actually change your approach if what you're doing isn't working or isn't leading to further progress. Maybe you've gotten as far as you can get with one particular resource, and so you could change resources, add in something else, or change mediums altogether. Like if you were using books, maybe now you want to use videos. If you were using one company's resources, maybe you want to change it up. Or maybe what you're using just wasn't working at all, and so you need something different. But either way, changing the resource that you're using, the medium that you're using, or maybe changing your approach in terms of studying. Like maybe you weren't doing LASER, now you want to do LASER. Or maybe you weren't reviewing adequately, and now you need to review in more depth.
So what do you think when it comes to self-studying versus using a tutor or using prep courses? What do you think some pros and cons are of those, or do you think students should be using a combination of different types of studying?
I would say a combination's ideal, but partially depends on your budget and how you learn best. Some people are super self-directed and don't need any support. Others might only need a study plan. Others might try a study plan and say they need more support to ask questions, and that's a case where a coach or a tutor or a course could be helpful. And some learn better in groups, some learn better one-on-one. I try out different things and see what works best for you and what works best for your budget as well. And also look at samples beforehand to make sure that you like the style of the person you'll be working with.
I think the first time that I wrote the LSAT, I took the self-study approach. So I just sort of bought a bunch of LSAT books and focused on watching YouTube videos, trying to understand my own mistakes. And the second time around, I decided to get it to see if I could bump up my score. And I think just having that accountability really helped me with my study plan, because I knew at the end of the week there was going to be somebody there who was going to see my progress. So when it came to making plans and getting so distracted while I was studying, I think that was a big help for me in terms of knowing I was accountable to somebody. So I think that was helpful in terms of studying. But I personally did not take a organized prep course. I heard pros and cons about it in terms of just everybody learning at a different speed. So, if you had already known certain things and you're sort of waiting for other people to catch up, that could be a waste of your own study time or moving slower than the rest of the class. So what would your experience with organized prep courses be?
That's a really good point. Yeah, I agree with you that when they're trying to cater to the middle of the group, a lot of people get left out. And so that's part of why a course may not be for everybody. That was definitely a problem with the in-person classes, which nobody's offering now due to quarantine. And so actually, like my courses are online, for example, and what I'll have students do is I'll have them watch the on-demand videos to build the foundation, and then they can join the live classes already knowing a lot of the basics. And also, I do what I call group coaching, which is a bit of a different format than most classes, where we're actually having students direct the class, where students are guiding the curriculum, where I'm crafting what we cover based on the actual questions of the students. So they can watch the videos for the explanations, but then bring the bigger, deeper issues into class, kind of like a flipped classroom model.
So in terms of studying for the LSAT Flex and the normal digital LSAT, do you think that students should be studying in a different method? Because the normal LSAT with the 5 sections and then the writing sample, that's more of like a marathon. It's more of an endurance. And a lot of it is making sure that you're focused for a long period of time. So do you think that the LSAT Flex, with just the 3 sections now, you should be approaching studying a little bit differently in any way?
Yeah, I do. And I've actually redesigned my courses specifically because of LSAT Flex, because I do expect it will be an option, if not the only option, for the foreseeable future. So what I would say is the content has not changed. So games, reasoning, reading comp, all of that remains the same. But simulating test day is a big part of where things change. So you're doing, as you said, 3 sections, not 5. Big difference. This is not a marathon. This is more of a sprint, which means that you've got to be ready to go the second the exam starts. So do some warm-up questions before you're actually opening up the ProctorU software. And I would always recommend in the past doing a warm-up, but now it's especially important because every question counts more. The other thing I'll say is that logical reasoning, which used to be about half the exam, is now only about 1/3 of the exam. And so you're studying up to exam day, you'd probably want to spend less time on LR than in the past and relatively more time on logic games and reading comprehension, since that's how the exam itself is going to weigh those things. But most other things actually don't change a whole lot. Like the content, the ordering games, grouping games, all of that's still there.
I think the biggest shift is definitely having only 1 section of logical reasoning. I got super unlucky on one of the LSATs I did, and one of my experimentals was logical reasoning as well. So I ended up having 3 sections, and that LSAT was super hard for me because I think it's the thing that you try to focus on the most when you're studying, because you know it's going to take up half your exam. And then I had no idea which sections were going to be marked for me. But I think one of the benefits of the LSAT Flex is knowing that every section you're doing is marked. So would you say that that's sort of easier in a way, that this exam format's like that?
I think it's great, honestly. Yeah, I think that knowing that every question that you're doing matters and you're done in 2 hours, that's probably a more pleasant test day experience than doing 5 sections in person with proctors walking around, other test takers distracting you, and you're doing an extra section that doesn't even count. And I could see the experimental being more stressful or less stressful depending, because you could say, oh, I did bad on that one, but maybe it was the experimental one, so it doesn't count. So it's hard to say exactly, but I do like the idea of just being done in 2 hours, and you don't have to go anywhere. To me, that's a more pleasant experience, assuming good internet connection and good device. Other than that, you're probably good though.
I mean, honestly, I'm recommending for anyone that asks me to do the LSAT Flex, because the experiences I had were so different, especially with test day nerves. I think a lot of it is due to being in an environment that you're not used to, the whole like plastic bag thing, worry that you're having something in there that they're going to take away from you. I remember just like preparing for that the night before. The closest testing center to me was an hour away, so I had to stay in a hotel overnight. So there's all those factors that kind of contribute to your test day nerves. So anyone asking me now, I'm like, yeah, do the LSAT Flex if you can. If you have a reliable connection, you don't have a lot of distractions at home, I think it's an amazing option for people right now.
Oh yeah, if you'll be ready in time to do the LSAT Flex, I would definitely opt for that. But with the big caveat, assuming you'll be ready in time. Thing is that there may be more LSAT Flex opportunities going forward. Like so far, only the May and June LSATs were LSAT Flex. June LSATs is about 2 weeks from now as we record. July LSAT is July 13th. I'm guessing that'll probably be canceled and rescheduled as another LSAT Flex. So if it is rescheduled maybe a week or so later, folks could register for the July LSAT now. Deadline is May 28th, so it's very soon as we speak, but that could be a chance to do what will likely be an LSAT Flex. August also is a decent chance of being a Flex, and so anybody who's already been studying for at least a little while could opt for July or August to likely get the Flex.
Yeah, honestly, I hope they do even keep it beyond that. I think that it would be an awesome permanent thing to have. I don't know if they would do that, but if it does work out and they can overcome some technology issues, I think it would be a lot more accessible for a lot of people to take the LSAT.
Yeah, and I think the tech will get better. There were a number of issues with the May LSAT Flex administration a week ago with ProctorU, but I'm hoping that everyone will learn from that at LSAC and at ProctorU to make the June LSAT Flex go better. And the same thing happened last year with the digital LSAT, where the July LSAT had a lot of tech issues with the tablets last year. There were more issues with the subsequent administrations, but they reduced over time. And I think they will figure out the tech on the Flex. The one open question, though, is what would they do about not having an experimental section? If they can't ever test out future questions, they're going to run out of tests. So I'm wondering how they'll handle that, and I don't have an answer on that.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely a very good point. So in terms of booking for the LSAT Flex this year, it's kind of hard to know when you're going to be ready to take the exam. So something that I've been asked is, you book it, but then how do you know that you really are ready and that you aren't just going to delay it? So, one thing is obviously taking practice exams and seeing how you're scoring. If you're scoring as high as you'd want to do on the real exam, but there's obviously a bit of a buffer in terms of how you will perform, like maybe 5 points up, 5 points down what you're practicing. So what would you tell the students who are a little bit nervous about booking and not being sure if they're going to be ready to take the exam?
Yeah, it's a good question. And unfortunately, the deadlines are always far in advance of the actual date. So you've got to book not knowing whether you'll be ready or not. But what I say is book. It obviously is unfortunate if you lose the fee or have to postpone and lose some of the fee, but just the reality of the game. But what I would say is you book the test date that you're targeting. Then as it gets closer, you're taking timed exams. Take the average of your most recent 5 exam results, and that'll be the best indication of where you stand. So assuming they're taken in a relatively short period of time, close to your test date, that's where you measure yourself. And you've got to have a bit of a buffer, ideally, where let's say you really want a 165, at least you've gotten some exams above that result in case things drop on test day due to nerves or something like that. Hopefully fewer nerves on the Flex, but that's what I would say is your best indication. But if you're not ready, don't take it. No reason to have a take on record if you could avoid it. Just postpone and hope to be ready for the next one.
Yeah, for sure. And how is LSAC dealing with cancellations for LSAT Flex? Do you still only have that, couple day period after the exam to cancel?
Yeah, they give you 6 calendar days where you could cancel your score. Same for the Flex. And I typically actually don't recommend canceling unless you know for a fact that something went terribly wrong, because at least law schools in the US, they don't average multiple scores. They only take the highest. I understand things might be different in Canada depending on the school, but at least for those in the US, they're only taking the highest, which means you typically don't want to cancel and you do want to retake.
Yeah, in Canada, most law schools also do take your highest score while they do see all your scores. And yeah, I've heard a lot about not canceling your score unless something, kind of crazy happens on test day. And I wish I had canceled my first score because there was an alarm that went off during my first LSAT exam. And it was unfortunate kind of how LSAT dealt with that, because we finished the rest of the exam and they had told us that it might not count. So that kind of messes with you when you're doing the whole exam. And a lot of people had to retake because they scored like 10 points lower than what they expected. And a bunch of us didn't cancel. So I do wish I had canceled in that scenario. But other than that, I do agree that, you probably did better than you think you did.
Yeah, typically it's very normal to walk out of the test feeling like it went horribly wrong, but also not being able to point to anything super specific that was a major game changer. Like if you bombed a whole game or bombed a whole reading comp passage, that could be the difference maker, but just having a vague sense of unease is normal. But in your case, like a fire alarm, to me, that's a clear, unique event that would justify canceling. And especially the mind game of not knowing whether it counts, that's crazy. I can't believe they couldn't just give you an answer on that.
Yeah, for sure. And even after, we were trying to get them to write like a letter to law school to let them know what happened, because they had no idea why, that score was like that. But yeah, unfortunately that was that was what happened. In terms of like fairness, because there are people applying for this law school cycle who have written LSATs, digital LSATs, and the LSAT Flex. So do you think that law schools really have a good way of comparing all those different scores with the different testing methods in this sort of transition period?
They're doing the best they can, which is simply to treat them all the same. And obviously, 3 sections at home is not the same as 5 sections in person, but you have the added stress of just the general pandemic situation and taking a new format. So it all kind of cancels out. It's all a wash essentially, at least for law schools.
Right.
They're treating the results of Flex the same as in person. Obviously, one you might prefer one over the other, but it is what it is. Just the best anybody can do these days. So they will treat it all the same. And if you don't get the score you want because it's the Flex, I mean, you can have whatever valid reason you have to use as a excuse for not doing well, but ultimately schools will just say retake. Nothing substitutes for the number itself. You could write an addendum, but retaking is really what's going to make the difference for you if your numbers aren't where you want them to be.
Well, looking forward to the fall, I think schools are starting to try and decide what they're going to be doing, how they're going to be delivering curriculum for first years or upper years. So I don't know, maybe we could discuss some pros and cons about decisions law schools might make for the fall.
Yeah, sure. I mean, well, I guess the biggest options are online only, in person only, or a mix. I mean, how are you feeling about it? What are you looking towards for the fall?
I mean, it's definitely not the experience I thought I was going to have going in, but everyone's in the same boat right now. They have sort of proposed a hybrid model. They've proposed having just first years be in person so that they could, have the correct space assessment for the building and have upper years be online. So nothing is for sure yet. Which obviously proposes a bit of a complication for finding rent people that are moving, coming out of province. So yeah, everything's a little bit up in the air right now. I think there are some pros and cons of both. I mean, it depends on your living situation as well. Some people might find that very distracting, and that might really affect how your performance in school. Other people might be so happy to not have to get dressed and have to go to class. So, I mean, I think everyone's going to experience it in a very different way. So I hope I hope that they can account for that somehow. But, it's a very difficult situation right now, not knowing.
Yeah, it's pretty tricky. I mean, this is so unprecedented to not know what's going to happen just a few months from now. And they may not even know in early August what's going to be happening in late August. And so things like renting a place to live, I could see being very tricky since obviously landlords need certainty and students need certainty about where they're going to be. So I'm hoping that at least the fact that everyone's in the same boat makes it somewhat more manageable because nobody has an advantage. But yeah, that's tough. I understand, at least from schools in the US, that they are doing a lot to replicate the online situation as much as possible if they have to go down that road. And I would imagine that Canadian schools are doing the same in terms of like Zoom classes and such.
Yeah, and obviously an additional obstacle is international students. So, imagine having to wake up at like 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning for an exam. So there's obviously that obstacle with online learning. And I mean, somebody's going to be affected at some point. So I guess we'll just have to see how it turns out.
Yeah, exactly. Not much more we can know other than that at the moment. But I'm hoping that at least professors got a chance to learn from the spring semester about how to handle things like online classes for the fall and to experiment with different techniques like Zoom meetings versus webinars versus breakout rooms. There's a lot of tools available that could make for a more interactive experience and foster communication between students, because you want to have that experience with your classmates that's so fundamental to 1L especially.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I guess one of the concerns that I have is not having, access to as many clubs and, events on campus and clinics. And those are the things that kind of, I guess, differentiate you when you are applying for jobs and in the OCI process and all of that. So I don't know, I feel like grades are going to have such a bigger impact at this point because there really is nothing else that can differentiate you. So I guess we'll see how that's going to work for applying to jobs next year.
Yeah, certainly. But one thing I'll add that I heard from a professor is that, if anything, like doing well under these conditions demonstrates a certain resiliency that is impressive. If you can get top grades and stay focused, despite the fact that you're not able to go anywhere for these classes, if you are doing them at home or from your apartment or a dorm room, and you're not getting the in-person interactions, but still performing at a top level despite all of that, and despite potential motivation issues of not going anywhere, that itself is impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I hope that it'll be possible to stay motivated if it is online the whole year or the whole semester. So I guess it'll be interesting to see how it turns out.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else we didn't cover on this?
I think that's, all I had for now, but, if you want to just share some final thoughts for students going through the LSAT process or application process, what are some, final tips or advice you'd offer them?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I guess I'll say with regard to the LSAT prep side of things is if you're under quarantine and you have more free time than normal, do what you can to make the most of this time because it is a unique opportunity and your competitors certainly are. So a couple hours in the morning, couple hours in the afternoon, and that's it. Don't burn yourself out trying to do too much, but also don't do zero. And I've got study plans and guides, cheat sheets, explanations, and videos and such to make it easier to prep for the LSAT. And the other thing I'd say is be patient and compassionate with yourself as well, because if you do have other obligations or it's tough studying at home, don't feel like you have to do it all now. Just create a plan for yourself that's manageable and sustainable. And if you have to postpone the LSAT, so be it, but it'll always be there for you when you're ready, and make the most of the time that you have with what you can.
For sure. I think that's some really awesome advice that I think a lot of people are, would be glad to hear right now. So thank you so much for that.
Of course. Thank you for a great discussion, Karen. Do you want to share more about your channel for those watching on my end?
Yeah, for sure. So if you guys want to follow me on Instagram, it's at Gavels and Glam on Instagram and YouTube. So it's a platform where I'm sort of combining a bunch of my different passions, hoping to document my law school journey, wanting to inspire people to consider law school or offering tips and advice for studying for the LSAT, study tips, and especially motivation during this time. So if you guys want to join me on there, I'd really appreciate your support.
Fantastic, Karen. And folks can find me, Steve Schwartz, over at the LSAT blog, as well as the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel and podcast. Also got a Facebook group and an Instagram, putting out tons of information every day regarding the LSAT Flex and other recent changes as things unfold. Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care.